What's up, guys? It's three-time NFL Pro Bowler, all-decade return specialist, Josh Cribbs. I want to welcome you to the Match Sports Connection podcast, where Alex hosts all things Mac, all things football, all things sports, right here. Match Sports Connection, baby. The Mid-American Conference best, bringing it only the greats, Mac, to everyone.
Welcome back, everyone, to the Max Sports Connection podcast. I'm your host, Alex the Captain. Joining me, as always, your co-host, my co-host, everybody's favorite co-host, really, let's be honest here, Graham Giles. Graham, welcome back.
Wow, I get everybody's favorite co-host. That's 100% not true. I could name 13 better co-hosts just off the top of my head. So I'm probably the 14th best co-host. You can take that to the bank.
Listen, that's top 15, and that's good enough to get you into a bracket. Speaking of brackets, it's NCAA tournament time, Graham.
That's right. It's NCAA tournament time. This past week, we had one of, if not the most exciting weeks of the MAC schedule. Is the MAC championship. It had both the men's and women's championships going on in Cleveland, and it was exciting because MAC basketball is always exciting in Cleveland. But it was pretty chalky, Alex. It was a pretty chalky tournament on both sides. It
really was. This is one of the few times where you've seen things just go kind of as planned, right? It's like, all the top seeds on day one advanced, did their job on day two, and then we saw a 1v2 in both brackets. On the women's side, it was Ball State versus Toledo as 1v2. On the men's side, it was Akron versus Miami as the 1v2, and the ones came away with it. We saw Ball State knock down Toledo in that championship game. Toledo looked good for about 3/4 of that game. Just couldn't put Ball State away. Ball State pulled away. I mean, this Ball State team has been excellent all year long. Kind of expected that they were going to win this one. And then Akron. Now, I know you watched part of this game, or at least most of it. I didn't get a chance to. But I saw the box score at halftime, and I'm like, okay, well, Akron's losing this game. And I immediately put my phone back to go do the rest of my performance. And I come back, and Akron has come from behind to win this thing. Graham, you want to detail that game a little bit more?
It was nuts. It was a wacky game. Watch this one from the comfort of my couch, but it was certainly exciting. I only needed the edge of that seat. It wasn't for most of the game. It really wasn't that exciting. It's a game that looked like I was going to look so foolish in talking about how Miami was not who we thought they were all year long, how they might be pretenders. And turns out they weren't. No, they weren't. It really, that's Miami did prove me wrong this weekend. I'll take that. I wear that. But they led by as much as 18 points in the game. And it looked like even into the third quarter, into the fourth quarter, that this was going to be Miami ball game. Akron cut into the lead a little bit there to start the second half, but it didn't look like it was going to be enough. And then suddenly hitting into that, what would be the fourth quarter. It's the second half in college basketball here, but what would be the fourth quarter, Akron started to pour it on. And it really went on a 7-0 run. Nate Johnson took over. Really looked like a man on a mission. We talked about before the tournament. We talked about Nate Johnson, Tavari Johnson, Armani Lyles. All three of those guys look great, but it was Nate Johnson stepping up. We had talked about in our preview that Nate Johnson was great. A true stud, but not the kind of star that Akron has had in the past. Like, we kind of name dropped Enrique Freeman there. And really in this tournament, he showed out. He looked like, and especially in this championship game, he looked like a true star for this Akron team.
Yeah, looking at his numbers a little bit more, he finished the evening rather, 22 points, went 8 of 13 on field goals, 5 of 6 on free throws, and he had the game winner with about 3 seconds left. A nice little layup, gets past the defender, kind of sidesteps him a little bit. Nice little bucket there to win this thing. Like I said, it looks like about 3.2 seconds left on the game clock, and I got to tell you, that arena was hopping for that game. I went back and watched a little bit, checked out some highlights. I saw about 10,000 plus people were at the game for this championship match, and it looked like it. It looked every bit of 10,000 people and more, and that's a great thing to see.
Yeah, those Zips fans really turn out when Akron's having success, and especially as close as Cleveland. And so we do see Akron really turn out for those games. And they were out in full force. Have plenty of friends who are Akron alumni, and they were all talking about going to Cleveland and catching, if not just this game, the entire tournament. Folks talking about finding their way to Cleveland and taking it in. And really, that's what we love to see. When it comes to MAC basketball, it really is the taking it in person is different than taking in a game from the comfort of your couch. Even though I did enjoy the game this weekend, taking it in that way.
Yeah, again, just a great championship run. Akron took down Bowling Green, a 29-point victory. The Toledo game was interesting. I did get to watch a little bit of this. Toledo struggled to stop the threes in that first half, and that really, I think, spelled doom for the Rockets. I think if you're a Toledo fan, there were no expectations to win in Cleveland this week. I think, you win one game, you honestly should just be happy with that. And that's what happened. They beat the Ohio Bobcats in overtime in the quarterfinals. But Toledo, for all the offense they were able to find, they couldn't find the defense to help out that offense. And I think you mentioned this last week on our preview. You mentioned, Toledo could score 1 billion points, but they're also going to give up 1 billion points. And that's exactly what happened in this game.
Yeah, not quite 1 billion, but certainly a game where it did seem like whatever Toledo did, Ball State matched and more. And so that was the tough part here is, how do we talk about these teams when both teams played so well, but truly it was Ball State's game from start to finish. This one, I was never in doubt.
That champion, yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about that women's championship. Obviously, again, hats off to Akron. We'll dive into their NCAA selection here in just a moment. But this Ball State team wrapped up the season 27-7, 16-2 in the Mid-American Conference. And yeah, let's look at this Toledo game. Obviously 65-58 was the final score. Toledo actually, looking at it, they had a halftime lead. Toledo went into the half up 3, came out and actually did pretty well. And then we got to the fourth quarter. And that's when Ball State they turned it on. Alex Richard, the really, really stepped up in some big moments there for the Cardinals. She actually led the team. She had 28 points, was perfect from the charity stripe, 13 of 21 on field goals, and really just kind of led this team in all aspects. Allie Becky finished with 5 assists, but Alex Richard had 9 rebounds, 5 defensive and 4 offensive boards. When we talked about this last week, this is a team that was top to bottom, just a pretty solid team, and they showed it through this tournament.
Yeah, frankly, this is it's a tournament where I would have Alex Richard as my MVP. Allie Becky ended up walking away as the tournament MVP. We know that's voted on by lots of folks at the MAC championship game, but mainly I can't talk today. Mainly media members. Say that 3 times fast. I cannot. But Alex Richard would have had my MVP vote. She has been so good for Ball State in these tournament games. Last year we were talking about her as potential MVP, and really she was very good this weekend as well. And that's I think Allie Becky got kind of the benefit of the doubt, as we say, and not that she had a bad tournament, because she didn't. She played well throughout the tournament, but it seemed like Allie Becky played kind of how we expect Allie Becky to play, and Alex Richard elevated her game for this tournament, which is why she would have gotten my MVP, especially given this championship game. And it's funny, we talked about kind of our potential MVPs last week. Alex Richard wasn't on the list, although we did briefly mention her. We talked about Allie Becky, who ends up as the MVP here. We talked about Sammy McConowitz makes the all-tournament team. We talked about Chella Watson makes the all-tournament team. That's I think we did pretty okay, Alex.
Yeah, no, I think if any of these teams would have won the tournament, that player probably wins MVP. So hats off to you, Graham, for really coming up with that list, because I think you're right. You had quite a bulk of these all tournament team members ready to go. Just say, hey, this could be the potential MVP, and you make the all tournament team. I think that's as close to MVP as you're going to get without actually becoming MVP. So kudos to you, man.
Well, I don't know that's I don't want to take too much credit there. As we said, this tournament was super chalky on both the men's and women's side. The favorite won in every single game. Not necessarily the betting favorite, but the favorite in terms of seeding. The top seed moved on in each game. We went 1, 2, 3, 4 moving on in the first round, 1 and 2 moving on the second round, and 1 eventually winning it. That's both men's and women's side. That's got to be the first time in history that's ever happened, at least in the MAC.
If it's not the first time, it's definitely not happened for a long time. Because I'm thinking back to last year, it didn't happen on the women's side, didn't happen on the men's side. Toledo was the 1 seed in both, didn't win the championship. Toledo's been the 1 seed in both for the last 3 years, and it hasn't happened. I'll have to do some digging, but it's been a long time, if not, like you said, for the first time. Definitely looking at numbers, it's the first time in Cleveland. We know back in 17, Toledo won it out of the 6 hole. We saw in 16, maybe 17, Western Michigan won it over Toledo, who I think won the regular season that year. So it's just, it's been a long time. I'm willing to wager the first time in Cleveland.
Yeah, I'll bet it's the first time in MAC tournament history. I can't imagine a tournament where both the men and the women have the higher seed winning each time. I mean, talk about perfect seeding. That's exactly what you want to see in terms of the tournament, and the tournament is seeded based on the regular season. I mean, it's about perfect. It's hard to argue that anyone other than the tournament champion this year deserves to get the MAC's only bid to the big dance, and certainly that's what happened. Kind of boring if you're betting on the games, though.
A little bit boring, but if you bet chalk every round, you made a few bucks. If you just rolled it over after every game, you made every dollar you bet on.
Well, there were quite a few seeding favorites who were betting underdogs throughout the tournament. So if you were willing to just bet chalk, even against Vegas's suggestion, then you could come out ahead. Let's not talk about sports betting. I don't really love to talk about it. I think kind of the fun of collegiate athletics lies away from the gambling world. And speaking of away from the gambling world, we're going to send a couple of teams now to the big dance, which is going to invite even more sports betting. So what are we talking about?
We've got, well, like you mentioned, the Akron Zips. They are heading out west. They're going to take on number 4 seeded Arizona on March 21st. That's going to be available on True TV at 7:35 p.m. And I like this game for Akron. I like this game a lot for Akron. Obviously, the numbers don't give Akron a prayer, but this recent Akron team under John Gross has felt a lot like the old Buffalo teams that we saw in the late 2010s. That they were gritty, that they were aggressive, and they just kept finding ways to win. The old Nate Oates coached teams before he went to now Alabama. And that's kind of what I get out of this Akron team. I think, and you and I've talked about this before, I think that we thought coming into this season, Akron was going to be looking at kind of retooling and kind of figuring out what they needed to do to get back to being a contender in this conference. Well, they went 17-1 in the conference. Becoming a contender wasn't an issue. And they beat other tournament squads. That's the other thing. This Akron team has beat teams who are now going to the tournament, Omaha being one of them. This is a good Akron team, and they've only gotten better as the years gone on. They went 17-1 in the conference play. They have one loss since the start of 2025.
Yeah, and to an Ohio team who can turn it on, who we know can look really, really good. A team that we were a little bit afraid was going to kind of walk away with this MAC tournament, because they're the kind of team who can do that, turn it on for a weekend, and suddenly be the best team in the MAC. It didn't end up happening, but Akron has 6 losses on the year total. 28-6. Their losses come to first game of the season, Arkansas State. I think we can forgive that, if only a 5-point loss. A loss to St. Mary's tournament team. A loss to Milwaukee, that's a bad loss. I think I said that earlier. That's a bad loss. 19-point loss to Milwaukee. Loss to Yale, that's a tournament team. Lost to Princeton by a single point, almost not a loss at all. And then that loss to Ohio. This is the kind of thing that this Akron team is not used to losing, and we could see that come up here. Now, we talk about comparisons. Arizona is very good. Arizona is a very good team. They are ranked 21st in the country right now.
I believe so, yeah.
So they're ranked 21st in the country. Their net ranking has them at 12th in the country. So that's compared to Akron's 91st. So that's tough. That's tough to come back from. We compare records versus the top 25. Akron is 0-0. They have not played a top 25 team yet. Arizona is 6-5 against the top 25 teams. And when you compare that to other teams across the country and other teams in the tournament, that's pretty good. That's one of the top record versus top 25s that we've seen. In terms of strength of schedule, Akron down at 138th, Arizona at 11th. And now where Akron does have the edge at points per game, Akron 84.6 compared to Arizona's 81.7. Akron giving up 74.5 points per game, Arizona 72.4. So the numbers would say these Arizona Wildcats have the advantage, and I don't think anyone's gonna tell you differently. As of right now, Arizona's favored by 13.5 points, which is actually down from the open at 15.5. So maybe get your Zips bets in early, because the line is shifting. But I think this one is one you could almost immediately chalk up as an Arizona Wildcats victory, and I think that would be a mistake. This Zips team has looked like a team, especially since the new year. They've looked like a team who can step up compared to their opponents, and they look like a team who is ready to. Now that this MAC championship scared me. I mean, that looked kind of like the Akron of old. With these teams who would dominate the regular season and then come into the tournament and lose in the first or second round. And that's tough. Akron's made the NCAA tournament 6 times in their history, and they've lost every single one of those games. So that's tough. But the hopeful note here is this is not the Akron of old. This is not these Akron teams who relied on generally a single star player surrounded by good, not great supporting cast. This is a solid all-around team. Nate Johnson has the ability to step up when he needs to. Amani Lyle is always doing his job. That's the who else are we talking? Tavari Johnson, also great. And both those guys, Nate Johnson and Tavari Johnson, both guys who can put up points when needed. We're talking, into the 20-point range for both those guys. Akron can also get hot from behind the arc. And that's what these, smaller school teams generally do to move on to the next round. I wouldn't be surprised. In fact, spoiler for anybody who's playing in brackets with me, I do have Akron winning this first round matchup against Arizona. Call that a hometown bias pick, because it definitely is. I'm not sure that's where the smart money is, but I've got the Zips advancing to the next round.
See, I love that, and I think for the good of the conference, and I'm going to speak not just Akron, but for the good of the conference, I think it would be massive for the conference to have Akron advance to the second round. In recent history, the MAC has been looked at as, kind of a weaker mid-major. When it comes to the national conference rankings, the MAC sits in the lower, I think they sit 23rd, or maybe even lower, 25th in terms of conference rankings compared to the other 31, 32 conferences. And so the MAC does not get any love. The MAC is a one bid league. They've been a one bid league for a long time. Akron has the opportunity to help kind of reintroduce the country to the conference and say, hey, this is a quality conference. We've got quality teams. We just happen to be the team who gets to represent those teams. And I think this is a huge opportunity. We've been seeing it on the women's side for years. Trisha Cullop, Brady, Becky Burke, everybody over on the women's side have been talking about how good this the women's side is, and that the new rating that they use, the RPI, the net, all of this shift, I think has harmed the Mid-American Conference. And we see it every year. MAC schools who, at least on the women's side, and we'll get more on the women's side here in a minute, but I think we see a lot of MAC schools, they get the opportunity on the women's side to advance. They do advance. They get past the first round, sometimes past the second round. But then the ones who don't make the tournament make these incredible deep runs in the WBIT, the WNIT. We've seen a WNIT championship come to the Mid-American Conference. We've seen Bowling Green just 2 years ago. They made the Fab Four of the WNIT. So we see these programs who, in my opinion, are probably considered bubble programs for the NCAA tournament, make these great runs to kind of strengthen the case that, hey, this conference is still a good conference. I think we see it more on the women's side. The men's side, not so much. It feels like there's a lot of one and done, or you show up and you're done. Like we saw, Toledo, they've lost to Michigan in the first round of the NIT. They've lost to Dayton in the first round of the NIT. We've seen Kent State get bounced in the first round of the NIT. Like it doesn't happen as often on the men's side. And we can, like I said, we can talk the women's side here in a minute, but if you're an Akron supporter right now, this is a huge opportunity for not only Akron for national exposure. This is a huge opportunity to carry the banner for the conference and say, hey, we're the Akron Zips. We represent this conference, and we're going to show you why this is a great conference and why this conference prepared us to have this NCAA tournament run.
Yeah, and again, so this is Akron against Arizona in the East region, which explain to me why it's being played in Seattle. No idea. But we love that. And it should be an exciting game. This game is on the 21st, which if I'm looking at my calendar is Friday. And that's it's going to be a 7:35 p.m. Tip. So True TV. And, I'll be watching. I don't know if I'll be watching that on the television or on my app, but I'll be watching.
I'll tell you what's interesting. Just kind of one last thing about that region. I think it'd be really interesting, and I don't see it happening. I just want to be clear. But I think it'd be really interesting to see Akron go on a crazy run and somehow make it to the Elite Eight to take on an Alabama. You see Nate Oates coaching against John Gross, two MAC guys coaching against each other. I think that'd be a lot of fun. But if Akron makes it out of this first round, you get to take on Liberty and Oregon. And I would love to see Liberty and Akron take each other on. Just for nothing else, but a little bit of mid-major pride getting to the next round to guarantee a Sweet 16 spot for a mid-major. And I love that idea. Liberty, Oregon, tough matchup there for the Flames. But I just love the idea of a 12-13 duking it out to send somebody to the Sweet 16.
Well, both both Liberty and Oregon are really tough teams. It would be really hard for Akron to go beat an Arizona team who we already talked about. We already lauded Arizona, but to go on and then face either Oregon or Liberty, both teams who are tough. I don't really know. I suppose Liberty is a better matchup for Akron, but I think it would be tough either way. And then the road doesn't get any easier because presumably that next round would be facing Duke. So that's a tough road to the Final Four if you're trying to get there. So all of that to say, I do have Akron winning in the first round, but we might be hoping just for a good game here.
Fair enough. Let's flip the script. We've got a women's champion that we've already talked about, this great Ball State team who I think, top to bottom, proved they were the best team in the Mid-American Conference this year, proved it in the tournament. Now they get the 12 seed in the NCAA tournament, and they get to take on Ole Miss in the Regional 1 in Spokane. And this is going to be another Friday game, 321 rather, at 6 p.m. on ESPNU. I like this one a lot. I like this one a lot more, I think, for Ball State than I like the Akron game for Arizona. Only because I think Ole Miss, they played a solid year. They went 20-10, 10-6 in the SEC, when you've got the SEC who has Texas and South Carolina, both who won 30-plus games. You've got LSU who won 28 games. Then you got Oklahoma, Alabama, and Kentucky, all of whom eclipsed the 22-game mark. I like this matchup for Ball State because both teams are being forced to travel. I feel like we saw a couple years ago, we saw Toledo in the NCAA tournament. They had to play down at Tennessee, in Tennessee in that second round. One of the toughest places to play if you're playing women's college basketball, first off. And then you have to play them in the NCAA tournament at their home. That's a recipe for, Toledo was lucky to escape that game, losing by only 50, if I'm being very honest. I like this one because this is a true neutral site for both of these teams. And I think Ball State's ready to play.
Yeah, it's if Ball State comes out looking like they've looked this past weekend, where it looked like they now there was the Toledo game was a hard fought game, but really the entire tournament, Ball State looked like a team who was tuning up and getting better and better each game. They looked better and better, and if that's the kind of thing that we're looking for, we can look forward to about Ball State against Ole Miss, they might have a chance. Now, that being said, Ole Miss is a very good school. They're currently ranked number 25 in the country. Their losses have come almost exclusively to top 10 schools or top 20 schools. They're very good. It's a very good basketball program at Ole Miss, and they top to bottom are a team full of studs. So I think this is hard. Ball State is a team who has plenty of experience, and that should help them. They're a team who has a couple of great scorers in Richard and Becky. They're a team who has a lot of great role players. It's Alex Becky, who is Allie Becky. I'm combining our two players here. Allie Becky, who does a great job of running that offense, and generally picking up assists. Alex Richard, who does a great job of pulling down boards. I think that dynamic duo of the two of them can make a difference for this Ball State team. But it's certainly tough sledding. That's Ole Miss is a tough matchup, and Waco is it's a neutral site. But I would be willing to bet we're going to see more Ole Miss Rebels fans there than Ball State fans.
No, and that's completely fair. I'm looking at the Ball State schedule right now, and just what they've put up. They've got 7 losses on the year. That's what I'm seeing here. They've got 7 losses, and I'm looking at it. So they have the loss to North Carolina. I'm just going to do this like what we did with Akron. They've got the loss to North Carolina. North Carolina, by the way, earned a 3 seed in the Birmingham regional. They've got the loss to Columbia. I'm not seeing Columbia in the tournament, so probably a bad loss. South Dakota State. They have a loss to South Dakota State, who earned a 10 seed in the Spokane regional. We have Ohio State, who earned a 4 seed in the Birmingham regional. And then the rest of their losses, they've got the loss to James Madison. I'm not seeing James Madison on this bracket. So again, possibly another bad loss. But then the rest of them, they lost to Toledo and Kent State, both of who are quality losses within the conference. I think that this Ball State team is a little bit battle tested, not as battle tested perhaps as Ole Miss. The strength of the SEC. I get that, but this is a Ball State team who didn't play a fluff non-conference schedule. They played several teams who are now in the NCAA tournament. They played ranked teams who are in the NCAA tournament, and for at least the North Carolina game, they battled them tough. Like that was an 11-point loss versus North Carolina. It's not great. Obviously it's a loss. It counts, but you scheduled appropriately to improve your strength of schedule, to improve the quality of the opponents you played. And I think that's going to benefit them in this tournament.
Yeah, I do. I think I like it that these MAC schools are scheduling tough opponents. That is the way to build those net ratings. It's tough here. You talk about the 11-point loss to North Carolina. It's hard to
Columbia
hang
is
up.
in the tournament, by the way. So Columbia is a tournament team. I do see
it's hard
on the bracket.
Hard to hang a moral victory on that. I have been kind of notorious for saying there's no such thing as a moral victory. I don't see a moral victory in an 11-point loss to North Carolina, and I certainly don't see a moral victory in a 32-point loss to Ohio State. Now, are North Carolina and Ohio State better teams than this Ole Miss team? Absolutely, they are. So we should expect there to be something closer to when it comes to Ole Miss, as far as scores, as far as keeping the game close. But Ball State has struggled against nationally ranked opponents this year, and the bulk of their success has come in the conference, and so it'll be interesting to see how that plays on a national stage, because we don't know. We really don't know what that conference success, how that translates. Ole Miss is a tough matchup. It's going to be a hard team. But if Ball State can pull out a victory there, I think it says everything about this Ball State team, because I think you're right. There's plenty of potential here. It'll be interesting to see that game. Also Friday, 6 p.m. You're going to run a split screen as you watch Ball State and Akron at the same time.
Nothing we're not used to doing when it comes to postseason games covering the Mid-American Conference. But yeah, I think that this is an opportunity for Ball State. Again, similar to Akron, you're carrying the banner for the conference. You're showing the world, hey, this is a quality conference. And I think the women's side gets a little bit more grace than the men's side does, mostly because the women's side in the NCAA tournament has had more success consistently. Whereas the men, it feels like every year it's all right. We go from Sweet 16 to round of 32, lost in the first round, lost in the on the women's side, it feels like we see a lot of advancing past at least the first round. We've had a couple instances where teams have advanced to the Sweet 16. In fact, just a few years ago, we had 2 teams advance to the Sweet 16 out of the Mid-American Conference. So it's just, I think that the women's side gets a little bit more grace in terms of the NCAA selection. Now, granted, still just one bid, but it is what it is. No, again, I'm excited. This should be a good matchup. Ball State has a great opportunity in front of them, and I'm really excited. This is going to be a lot of fun for this NCAA tournament on both the men and the women's side. Moving on, I want to make sure that you guys are fully aware that if you can't watch these games on split screen like we were just talking about, you can tune in and listen to them on the Varsity app by Lairfield. It is free to download on the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store. With this app, you can listen to all the live calls of your favorite D1 programs. You can hear calls from your voices across the MAC, Big Ten, SEC, whatever conference, the voices are there for you to tune in and listen to. Sign in, save your favorite schools, sports, all for easy access to their content. You're also going to find a bunch of great podcasts, not just yours truly, but you're going to find podcasts like the Group of Five Guys, the Sickos Committee, all on the Varsity Podcast Network, available in the Varsity app. Make sure you guys download that today so that you can listen to this NCAA tournament. It's going to be a great run. You're going to have a lot of great voices making great calls. Listen to those calls, and you can listen to the podcasts that bring your schools to life. Graham,
Absolutely.
We have other schools in the Mid-American Conference who have been invited to postseason events, and I'm excited about these because anytime you get the opportunity to take on a perennial program from a perennial conference, you can't say enough about how good those opportunities are for the league, especially when you pull out the victory. To kick it off, we've got Toledo, our alma mater, kicking it off with a first round game against Minnesota in Savage Arena. And Graham, you and I have been to enough basketball games at Savage Arena that the city of Toledo loves women's basketball. I'm expecting Savage to be hopping.
Yeah, I mean, Savage loves women's basketball, and not just Savage, but the city of Toledo at large. And really, I think Savage is going to be rocking for this game. The WBIT is another tournament that Toledo would love to hoist a championship trophy for, and certainly an opportunity for Toledo. Minus Trisha Cullop to show that they are still a dominant force in and out of the Mid-American Conference. Now, I don't know much about this Minnesota Golden Gophers team. They've had kind of a similar year to Toledo in terms of success at large and success within their conference. Mm-hmm. The betting favorite, the prohibitive favorite, is Minnesota in this one. But I think so many times when it comes to basketball, especially women's basketball, we tend to just go ahead and throw that favoritism towards the larger school. And when it comes to basketball, that's not always the way to go. We see these smaller schools winning far more often in basketball than in a sport like football. With that being said, Minnesota had a great year. Their losses come to some of the best teams in the country. Most of their losses against top 25 teams. The exceptions to that being against Iowa and Oregon, and then twice to Washington. So the rest of their losses are against top 25 teams. We don't know much about this Minnesota team other than how they've done in the Big Ten. And so this will be another interesting one, how these teams fare outside the conference. Toledo with home field advantage. It could be interesting.
One of my favorite things that Toledo does. So for those who aren't aware, this is the second year, I believe, of the WBIT. And this is in terms of hierarchy of postseason tournaments on the women's side, it's the NCAA tournament, the WBIT, and then the WNIT. The WNIT has been shifted down that rung a little bit. But this is a huge opportunity for Toledo. One of my favorite things that Toledo has done, and they've done this since when Trisha Cullop got there, which I think honestly was a big part of the reason why they won the WNIT. they will do whatever they can to host as many home games through those tournaments as possible. The university goes all in. The athletic department is all behind the program and says that we want to give our fans a great postseason experience, and they do. Anybody who's watched any of those games online or on TV or whatever, you see just how packed Savage gets. And Toledo's done a great job of getting a lot of those games to be in Toledo. Again, that entire WNIT run, Toledo didn't go on the road once back in 2011, and they won the whole thing. They beat USC by double digits. They blew them out in front of almost 8,000 fans, something like that. I mean, it was a great environment, and they've done a great job doing that. Toledo, I was looking at the seeding earlier. The top 4 seeds on this quartile of the bracket, seeds 1 through 3 are all hosting. Number 4 is Minnesota, and they have to travel. So I love that that's what Toledo does, and I think that's a great opportunity for the Rockets. And I think you're right. It's easy to look at Minnesota and say, all right, prohibitive favorites. Savage is a tough environment to win in. You've seen coaches from all over the country who have come to Savage and say, no, this is a tough place to win. So I think Minnesota's got to be ready for that. Sammy McConowitz, potentially her last game in a Rockets jersey. This is going to be a huge opportunity for her to step up in front of the home crowd one more time and say, no, we're not done yet. So I love this matchup.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right. Love the gamesmanship from the University of Toledo, coming out there and saying, we're going to host in this tournament. We're going to figure out a way to give our student athletes success. And it's the kind of thing that really you like to see in the Mid-American Conference. Sometimes the conference gets snubbed, and we're going to talk about a further snub later. But sometimes the conference does get snubbed, and the way to fight back is to make these moves, to say, look at our venue, look how good we do when we host these tournaments, and get a little bit of recognition that way. I love the scrappiness, and I just hope that we see that scrappiness on the court. Would love to see Toledo going deep in this tournament.
Absolutely. Moving on to the WNIT, we've got Buffalo and Miami, Ohio, both received bids. A little bit surprised we didn't see a potential Kent State bid, but the Bulls and the Red Hawks get a bid for the WNIT. Their opponents have not yet been announced. They are going to be announced. Tonight is Monday, so you guys will know the opponents by the time this episode drops. But those games will not be in, those opponents and matchups will not be announced until later on this evening. But again, similar to Toledo, huge opportunity for these programs to get to be seen on the national stage. Even if it's not the NCAA tournament, there will still be eyes on this tournament. People who love college basketball, people who love women's college basketball. This is the time of year to showcase what's out there, to showcase what's available. You're still only getting out of 364 programs in the country. You're still only getting about 120 that are competing in postseason events. So 1/3 of the entire Division I set is getting an opportunity to compete in a postseason game. MAC getting 2 more teams here in the WNIT.
Yeah, and we'd love to see it. I love both these programs. That's Buffalo and Miami. Both had great years. We talked about each of these schools having a potential tournament MVP on them in last week's show. So I do think this is great for them. Also surprised that Kent State doesn't get a bid here because the Kent State team also very good, arguably a better season than Miami. So interesting that Kent State doesn't get that bid.
Extremely interesting, and perhaps not as interesting as the converse for the NIT. The NIT, of course, the second tier of the men's side, which is, and they've changed this format about a half a dozen times in the last, there's another change. In the last 2 weeks, it feels like. But the NIT invited the Kent State Golden Flashes, who we all know has been a relative power in the Mid-American Conference. There's been a little bit of a drop off, but every year you say Kent State's going to be a contender. Kent State's going to be a contender, and this year is no different. They took the 3 seed in the MAC tournament this year, made it to the semifinals, lost to Well, for the third time, lost to the Miami Redhawks. Miami, of course, lost by 2 in the championship game. And Miami does not get a bid to the WNIT. And let me tell you, David Saylor from Miami is hot over this topic.
Which I kind of, fair, right? I mean, this is a Miami team who everybody has been snubbing all year long, myself included, despite their apparent success. This is a Miami team who continues to win regardless of what a couple of melonheads like me have to say. And it is wild that after this weekend, after the tournament kind of proves that this Miami team deserves at least to be second in the MAC. It's wild that they would not receive an invite. And even more so that Kent State gets that over the Redhawks.
And I think so. Like, if any of you are following along on Twitter with what David Saylor's been saying, this has to be my favorite tweet from him today. NIT, riddle me this. Miami, Ohio basketball submitted a bid to host and participate in the WNIT. We finished 25-9, 14-4 in the Mid-American Conference. If you do not want to take a MAC team, okay. But then you take one that we beat 3 times and finish 3 games better than in the standings. Make it make sense. They finished the top 30 in several offensive categories. The student athletes and our coaches work their tails off, and you choose a team that we beat 3 times. Coach Steele and team deserve better. I'm happy Kent State gets in. There's that brand recognition when it comes to basketball. Kent State basketball. People countrywide know Kent State basketball. Not like they do maybe perhaps UCLA, but people are at least familiar with Kent State basketball. If this was purely about taking a team who has brand recognition, okay, I kind of get it. But when you throw out, these are the metrics we use, this is the info, this is the data, and you use all these little tiny data points and you say, this is what we need to do, this is what we need to look at, and then you don't even count the head-to-head, and not only the head-to-head once, the head-to-head 3 times. Miami swept this Kent State team. Miami had a better record. Miami finished with a better standing in the Mid-American Conference. Miami made the MAC championship and lost by 2 points with 3 seconds left to go. And you're saying that they are not good enough to play in the NIT tournament this year. That to me is absurd.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue. I mean, I see it. I see the argument here, and it's the argument we've been making all year, is that Miami played an easier schedule than Kent State did. Miami just played fewer opponents, and because of that, when we talk about quality wins, Miami only had the opportunity for one, and they lost that game. So hard to make that argument. But that being said, strength of schedule is one thing, but what about strength of record? What about the fact that Kent State had a harder schedule, but they still lost their 2 quality win opportunities? They still lost to Miami 3 times. It's hard to make an argument that because your metrics say Kent State is better, then they are better, when we have evidence to the contrary, not once, not twice, but 3 times this year. I struggle to understand it. I understand that we want to stick with these ranking system. We want to stick with the net rankings, the BPI, the whatever else you're looking at. But it's hard for me to understand taking all of that into account to the exclusion of things like head to head.
I think diving into numbers a little bit more, this is and again, you and I can argue about this till we're blue in the face. The NIT committee is not going to change their minds. Of course, if they stopped inviting teams who were in other tournaments, and they could figure that out, and that's been a whole fiasco. They invited a team who accepted a bid to the CBC tournament. Both of those tournaments invited. They didn't realize they'd already accepted that bid, and then they turned around and invited another team. And then they're like, oh, wait, they're going to come to the NIT. The NIT this year has been awful. The committee has done a very poor job of organizing this so far. But in terms of numbers, total offense, Miami, Ohio, 80.6 points a game, second in the conference. Kent State, 73.7, third in the MAC. Margin of victory, Miami of Ohio, 7.9, second in the conference. Kent State, 5.4, third in the conference. Overall record, Miami 25-9, 14-4. Kent State 22-11, 11-7 in the conference. And then the head-to-head. It just, none of it makes sense. Again, I know we can argue about this till we're blue in the face and, throw our fist in the air and shake them at the NIT gods, but this just feels like a slap in the face to not just to Miami, but to the MAC as a whole. And again, it's time to change that perception.
And really, I'm having a hard time figuring it out. I pulled up the net ratings here just because I was curious. And of course, we know the reason that Kent State got this bid is because they have a higher net ranking. That's 128 compared to 147 for Miami. But one of the things we look at when it comes to these rankings are wins against the quadrants. We talk about quad 1, quad 2, quad 3, and quad 4 wins. Kent State is 0-2 against quad 1 and 0-2 against quad 2, making their overall record against the 0-4. Miami 0-2 against quad 1, just like Kent State, but they're 1-2 against quad 2. So that additional win in quad 1 and 2 apparently doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Miami's record only slightly worse than Akron's record against quad 1 and 2. So I have a hard time understanding why Kent gets this boost that Miami doesn't, especially considering the head-to-head. But that's arguing about it doesn't change things. Just to say that we agree with David Saylor.
Absolutely. If somebody out there knows and has a real reason, we'd love an explanation. Please feel free to hit us up. DMs are open. Would love to figure this out. Would love to have. There's an NIT committee member who wants to come on and talk about this and explain the reasoning. We welcome you. Please come on in. We'd love to get that feedback from you, and we'd love to understand the real reason as to why. If it's purely net rankings, all right, fair enough. But when there's a bunch of other metrics on the table, including head-to-head, I think those carry a little bit of weight, or else why play the game?
Well, yeah, I mean, exactly. That's always been the question is if we're going to rely so much on computer rankings, why don't we just have computers play the game? The reason that the NCAA, this March Madness season, is so exciting is because the computer is not always right, and often it's wrong. So with that being said, go out there in your brackets. Again, fill out a men's and a women's bracket. It's double the fun. And, go ahead and pick Ball State and Akron to win at least in the first round, because that's practically a guarantee. And
really, if you're going to fill out at least a men's bracket, do our bracket challenge. As you guys saw on Twitter, we are doing a little bit of a fundraiser right now, trying to raise some funds to help deliver some new content for you guys, bring in some opportunities for us to upgrade some equipment, headsets, microphones, software, things like that, so that we can do a better job of giving you guys more action. But also, the winner gets 50% of the pot. I don't know, Graham. That feels like a pretty good deal to me. That's you tell me I've got a 50%, or that if I'm entering a contest and I win it, I get 50% of the entire pot. Feel like I'd want to sign up for that contest. It's only $2 a bracket, and it's unlimited brackets, guys. So as many brackets as you want. You can find that on Sleeper. I posted it on Instagram, our Twitter page, Facebook page, whatever. All the information's there. Get your $2 in, get your bracket filled out, participate, help us raise some funds, and give yourself an opportunity to win a few bucks, because college basketball better than everybody else.
Yeah, and I'm already in the bracket challenge, and I notoriously am awful at brackets every year. So you got at least one chump who you can just take his money. So that should be, I think that should be enough to attract some of you degenerate gamblers to join in.
Awesome. Hey, guys, thank you so much for joining and tuning in this week. Please make sure that you guys do us a solid. Hit subscribe wherever you're listening to podcasts, whether that be YouTube, Apple, Amazon Music, Google, wherever you're listening to your podcast. Please hit subscribe. Please leave us a review, positive, negative. We want to hear from you. We want to understand what you like, what you don't like, and if it's how we talk, maybe that software that we get will upgrade our voices too. Who knows? But make sure you guys are liking, subscribing, reviewing, and sharing the show. That helps us to reach more Mac fans all over the country, all over the world. We want to reach every ear of every Mac fan that we possibly can, because we believe in this conference as the best conference in America, and we want you guys to help us spread that message. That's going to do it for us this week, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate it. We will see you next week with results from the first round of the NCAA tournament on the men and women's side, and with results from the WBIT, the WNIT, and the NIT. Thanks for tuning in, guys. We'll see you next week.